Hi everyone, how are we doing today? Thank you so much to Veronica for that wonderful introduction, and also to the entire SLC team for this recognition. This is my third SLC that I've been a part of, and I'm thrilled that I get to waste your time for 9 minutes. So as you heard, I'm a musician with a little bit of a unique story. 7 years ago, I was a UBC science student. Where are the science students at? So I was sitting in Bio 140 labs learning about a woodlouse, or Percellio scaber, if you will, and I could not read a note of music. And after a few moments of clarity, which would take another 7 years to explain, I've squeaked into the UBC School of Music by the skin of my teeth, and since then have been lucky enough to graduate at the top of my class, to be a Westbrook Scholar, to have conducted orchestras from Vancouver to New York and everything in between, to play all the time with my own jazz orchestra, and to have recorded an album with my professional band in December for a March release. They made me say stuff about me, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But whenever I am forced to talk about what I've done in 7 years, the question I always get is, how did I make it happen in such a short time? And why didn't I ever take a break? How is it possible that all of this happened in 7 years? And that's kind of the core of what I want to talk to you about today. It's not about how you go beyond your lines, because who am I to give such life advice? But it's about why you go beyond your lines. For me, it's caring so deeply about something that burns so white hot deep inside your soul that when you get up in the morning, you can't possibly do anything else with your day, except pursue your passion. And that's really, to me, what going beyond your lines means. My sister's a doctor. She works as an emergency physician in Calgary at the equivalent of VGH. Her and I joke that she did 3 degrees here, I did 2.5, so they should really name a mall after us or something, like East Mall, West Mall, Bait Mall. And if you're anything like me, you know that family dinners can be really awkward when your sibling is literally saving lives, and you're trying to convince everyone that your big career change and first-year music theory is just as important and interesting. And it was in those very, very early days that I found myself wondering about all these composers and artists and performers that I was learning about in school and wondering how they went beyond their lines. So bear with me, we're going to circle back to this. Beethoven, writing his Fifth Symphony, da-da-da-da-ya-da-da-dum, he, thank you. Beethoven was really well known for his tirades. We know now that he probably suffered from bipolar disorder, but he was famous for yelling at conductors, for yelling at the orchestra, for yelling at his colleagues, yelling at the audience. Step number 1 of performing, don't yell at the audience. His Fifth Symphony was no different, and he's yelling at everyone involved, and the performance finally comes, and afterwards this colleague asks, well, was all that worth it just for a performance? And Beethoven says, well, couldn't you hear? So we'll circle back to that. Billy Strayhorn. Between the 1920s and 50s, mid-20th century, the US, along with the rest of the world, was not kind to gay African-American pianist who wanted to join the ranks of classical performers. So he was forced into jazz. And although that was truly a tragedy, the jazz world and music at large is also happy that he picked up the pen to start writing jazz. He wrote a ton of music, but whereas Beethoven was known for yelling at people about it, Billy Strayhorn was always filled with anxiety and self-doubt, not knowing whether he was good enough. One of these commissions, he couldn't decide on a dominant chord between a C13 sharp 11 flat 9 and a C13 sharp 11 sharp 9. I appreciate the music support, I love it. The 2 people from the school. The difference in English between those 2 chords is a D flat and an E flat. 2 semitones, and most likely you wouldn't even really be able to hear it go by. But Billy Strayhorn spent hours, days, weeks, years of his life fretting about these musical decisions. Not just with this chart, but everything that he wrote. We'll circle back to that. 3 years ago, 22-year-old conductor, standing right about here, but facing the other way on a podium. 10 a.m. on a Sunday, doing the worst sound check. It was super sketchy. And there was talk maybe that I should be fired, maybe I shouldn't do the concert, maybe I shouldn't be invited back with the orchestra. Unbeknownst to anyone, my grandmother had died about 14 hours earlier. And she was someone that lived with my family since before I was born. Like a second mom, taught me how to tie my shoes and everything in between. And 14 hours earlier had lost a long and bitter battle with dementia and all the complications that come with that. And it was only after a phone call with my then teacher that reminded me that my responsibility to both her and the orchestra was to the music. So why are we learning about all these stories, these three people that don't necessarily seem connected and don't really have anything to do with going beyond your lines? The connecting theme is that none of them set out to go beyond their lines. None of them set out to be mentioned in a speech by a 25-year-old conductor in 2019 at UBC. What they did set out to do was to follow their passions so deeply and with so much conviction that they had no choice but to go beyond their lines. Beethoven had no choice but to feel the way he did about his music. Billy Strayhorn had no choice but to be filled with that much anxiety. And as for the 22-year-old conductor, ask me in 10 years if it works out. And that's really the point. It's why people go beyond their lines, not how. We all have different strategies in life, but it's finding the courage to at least want to try, because I can guarantee that it's one of the best ways to live life. I've stuck to what I know for most of this speech. I'm a musician, and I thought I'd bring up a few musical examples. And I can often be criticized for talking about these big, artsy, lofty, naive principles, you know, chasing symphonies and writing new big band music. But the truth is that these lessons can be extrapolated and applied to anything that any of you are chasing, whatever your goals may be. I found that going beyond means so much more than just sometimes going to class and being thankful that an exam is over. Music can bring a lot of pleasure and joy, but the music business can really teach you a lot of hard life lessons. And one of those lessons is that going beyond your lines happens in the in-between moments. It's not in the movie where the guy wins the Olympic gold medal and then the credits roll, Disney logo shows, everybody goes home. It's about the stuff in between that's usually glossed over, the 10 years or however many years of hard work and sweat and tears that go into it. It's those in-between moments where the magic really happens. It's when you wake up in the morning and you have to dig so deep to find the courage to keep going after what you want. It's when your friends and family tell you that what you're doing is a waste of time, but you just keep going in the face of that doubt. It's when your aunt at one of these family dinners says that you should just chuck this whole music school thing and do what Justin Bieber does. If only Stravinsky had a YouTube account, everything would be different. And these doubts are something that I live with myself on a regular basis. I've been a professional musician for a few years, and I've made dozens of dollars. It's like a poor man's La La Land. But the theme here remains, it's why we're going beyond our lines. And it may be if what you're doing right now doesn't burn so white-hot in your soul that you're called to action and you want to jump out of bed, jump out of your seat right now and go do what's ever calling you, that's okay. Maybe going beyond your lines is finding the courage to redefine them altogether, to maybe start a career in music when you really had no business doing so in the first place. And these lessons can be applied to anything that you're studying. So many disciplines are represented in this room, from forestry to engineering to math to theater to dance to everything in between. And each of those disciplines has examples of people that we see as going beyond their lines, but all had such similar struggles. From Michael Jordan, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Madame Curie, the Beatles, the list goes on and on and on. And the only theme that brings them all together is that they all thought it was worth it to go beyond their lines. Not for the sake of it. They certainly didn't go about going beyond their lines in the same manner, but they all committed to going beyond their lines because they cared too deeply about what they were doing not to. And if there's anything I can convince you of today, it's that that is a very worthy cause. In this process of pursuing perfection, whatever your perfection may be, you will find your lines. Sometimes you will run into them head first, and it will hurt like anything has hurt before. And often, you find your lines at the most inopportune time, when you just did not need to find them. But remember in those moments, just like any good student, that you always have a pencil with you, with an eraser on the back, and that you can draw whatever lines and erase whatever lines you want to at any time. Who knows, maybe at the end of the day, you forget to draw them back in altogether. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a great conference, and I'll see you soon.